Okay, ready for a wild ride? We're diving into the world of DeFi today. Decentralized finance. It's like, I don't know, stepping into a futuristic market, right?
hmm
Tons of possibilities, but also maybe a few risks lurking around.
Yeah, there's a ton of buzz around DeFi. But it's not all hype. There are some really big ideas here. Could actually change how we think about money.
Right. And I get it. For anyone just joining us, it can feel like everyone's speaking a different language, all this jargon, but that's what we're here for, to break it down.
Yep.
This deep dive is all about what DeFi actually is, why you should care, and of course, what to watch out for before you jump in.
Exactly. So we'll cover the core concepts, look at some of the big players out there, those platforms you keep hearing about, and we can't forget about the risks because like any new frontier, you got to be prepared.
Absolutely. So first things first, what exactly is DeFi? Like, how do you explain it to your, I don't know, your grandma?
Well, imagine a financial system, but there's no bank, no big institution calling the shots. That's DeFi. It uses this technology called blockchain, mainly Ethereum right now, to create these financial products and services that anyone with an internet connection can use.
It's like the Wild West, but for finance. So how does this whole decentralized thing work? What makes it different from, the traditional financial system?
It's all in how it's structured. With DeFi, there's no single entity in control. It's all about smart contracts, these self-executing agreements written in code, stored on the blockchain. So instead of going through a bank, you're relying on this transparent, automated system.
Okay, so that's decentralization. What about this permissionless thing I keep hearing? I mean, traditional finance is all about permissions, right? Approvals.
Right. Big difference there. In DeFi, you don't need permission from anyone to participate. You don't need a bank account, no credit check, no approval needed from some institution. If you have internet access and a crypto wallet, you can use these platforms. It's all about inclusivity, opening up opportunities.
That's huge, like democratizing finance. So, no central control, open access. Sounds pretty transparent.
And it is. That's a cornerstone of DeFi because all those transactions on a blockchain, publicly recorded, everything is out in the open, so there's a level of trust and accountability you don't really find in traditional finance.
Got it. So we're starting to paint the picture here of what makes DeFi unique. But let's get specific. What are some of the platforms where this is all happening?
There's a whole ecosystem. You've got platforms like Aave and Compound. Those are big in DeFi lending and borrowing.
Lending and borrowing without a bank. Okay, now things are getting really interesting. Walk me through that. How does it work, say, on a platform like Aave?
Sure. Let's say you've got some cryptocurrency just sitting in your wallet. On Aave, you can deposit that crypto and earn interest, just like a savings account, right? But then on the flip side, someone else can come along, borrow that crypto. They have to put up their own crypto as collateral, of course. And all this is managed by smart contracts, make sure everything runs smoothly.
That's wild. You're basically cutting out the middleman, the bank. But gotta imagine there are risks, right? Crypto can be incredibly volatile.
You're absolutely right. And that's where over-collateralization comes in, because crypto prices can be all over the place. Borrowers on platforms like Aave usually have to put up way more collateral than the amount they're borrowing.
So if the price of their crypto tanks, there's still enough to cover the loan.
Exactly. Helps to mitigate risk for the lender in this volatile market. But before we go too deep on DeFi lending, let's zoom out for a sec. You've heard of Uniswap, right?
Uniswap, that's like the stock exchange of DeFi, am I right?
You got it. Decentralized Exchange, or DEX. Users can swap different cryptocurrencies directly from their wallets. No intermediaries, just those smart contracts handling things. It's all about efficiency, giving users more control.
And there are so many other platforms out there, each with its own little thing. I read about Curve Finance. They focus on stablecoins.
Yeah, Curve is interesting. Stablecoins, they aim to be less volatile than other cryptocurrencies, so it's all about trying to manage those wild price swings.
Makes sense. And then there's Stargate Finance. I have to admit, the name alone, right?
Right, and they're doing some really cool stuff with something called auto compounding, which we can get into a bit later.
So many platforms, so many possibilities.
Right.
But as you hinted at earlier, no financial system is without its risks. So let's talk about those DeFi risks. What
Yeah.
should have our alarm bells ringing?
It's true, right? No reward without a little risk. And DeFi, yeah, it's got its fair share, but it's not about being scared. It's about being smart.
Exactly. Knowledge is power.
hmm
So let's talk about those DeFi risks. What should people be most concerned about?
Well, probably the biggest one, the one that keeps a lot of people up at night, smart contract vulnerabilities. We're talking about platforms built on code, and code can have bugs. And sometimes hackers, they can exploit those vulnerabilities and, well, it can get messy.
Yeah, that does sound a little alarming.
Hmm.
How common are these hacks, though? Asking for a friend.
Thankfully, it's not an everyday thing, but it's definitely a risk to be aware of, which is why it's so crucial to do your research. Look at the platforms, see which ones are prioritizing those security audits. Maybe stick with the ones that have been around a bit longer, the ones with a
Yeah.
good track record.
Due diligence is key. Don't just jump into the first platform with a flashy name. What about the risks that come with cryptocurrency itself? It's not exactly known for its stability.
Right, you can't talk about DeFi risks without talking about the volatility. Crypto prices, they can swing like crazy, which obviously has big implications for anyone lending or borrowing in this space.
Okay, so let me make sure I've got this straight. If you're lending and the price of the crypto you're lending against crashes, that's bad news for you.
Exactly. That's why we talk about over-collateralization. It's so important in DeFi lending. But even then, this market, there are no guarantees.
It's all about managing risk. Sounds like you really need to know what you're doing. Any other DeFi risks we haven't touched on yet?
One more big one, regulatory uncertainty. DeFi is still pretty new, and governments are still trying to figure out this whole thing, how to regulate it. That means laws and regulations could change, which could obviously impact the platforms, the users, the whole landscape.
The Wild West, but instead of saloons, we've got smart contracts. Okay, so we've covered the scary stuff, the potential downsides, but let's come back to those exciting opportunities for a sec. We're talking about things like yield farming, liquidity mining. Can you break those down for us?
Sure thing. Let's start with yield farming. Imagine traditional farming, but instead of crops, you're cultivating, I don't know, crypto returns.
I love a good analogy. Tell me more.
So you're planting your seeds, right? Your crypto assets, you deposit them into a DeFi platform, that's your field. And then by participating in different activities on that platform, like lending, providing liquidity, you earn rewards, just like harvesting your crops.
Okay, I'm with you. But I've heard yield farming can be risky too. What should people watch out for there?
Yeah, it's not all sunshine and digital harvests. One big risk is something called impermanent loss. This happens when the value of the assets you deposited, they change relative to each other. It can get a bit complex, but basically you might end up with less of one asset than you initially put in.
So again, really understanding the ins and outs of what you're doing is key. Now, what about liquidity mining? Sounds like, I don't know, providing liquidity to something.
Yeah, you got it. Think of it this way. You're the grease that keeps those DeFi gears turning. You provide liquidity to a decentralized exchange, like Uniswap, by putting your crypto into a pool. That allows other users to trade smoothly, seamlessly.
And in exchange for being the grease, you get rewarded with fees from those trades.
Exactly. It can be a win-win. But, and this is important, those risks we talked about, right? Smart contract vulnerabilities, market volatility, they don't just disappear. No such thing as a free lunch, even in DeFi.
Got it. Got to keep those risks in mind. Okay, so I'm sure some people listening are thinking, this all sounds very interesting, but how do I even get started with DeFi? Is it difficult?
It's actually getting easier all the time. The first thing you need, a secure cryptocurrency wallet.
Like MetaMask, I hear that name a lot.
Yeah, MetaMask is a popular one. It's designed to work with all those blockchain applications. You'll need to fund that wallet with some cryptocurrency, usually Ethereum or whatever the platform you uses. You can usually buy those on centralized exchanges, places like Coinbase, Binance.
Okay, so you've got your wallet, it's funded. Time to pick a DeFi platform. How do you even begin to navigate all that? It seems like new ones are popping up every day.
This is where the research comes in. I always recommend starting with the reputable platforms, Aave, Compound, Uniswap, the ones we've been talking about. Each one has its own strengths, its own weaknesses, so make sure they align with, your goals, your risk tolerance.
Like choosing the right tool for the job. What advice would you give to someone just starting out, someone who's maybe feeling a little overwhelmed by all of this?
Start small. Honestly, that's my biggest piece of advice. You don't have to go all in right away. Start with a small amount, something you're comfortable potentially losing. Think of it like, I don't know, your DeFi education fund.
I love that, your DeFi tuition. And speaking of investments, what does the future hold for DeFi? What's on the horizon?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Predicting the future. It's tricky.
Man,
But it is. It's always a gamble. But I don't know, some interesting trends to watch out for.
Okay, you're the expert, so maybe you've got a clearer view than
Right.
most of us. Seriously, though, what trends should we be paying attention to?
Well, one of the big ones is mainstream adoption. Right now, DeFi is still kind of niche, right? Mostly tech-savvy people.
Hmm.
But we're seeing more and more of those traditional financial institutions. They're starting to poke around, explore this space. And as DeFi platforms get more user-friendly, as those regulatory questions get answered, I think we're going to see even more people jump in.
So DeFi could be that bridge between the old school financial world and this new frontier.
I like that. It does seem like with all these really big technological shifts, the real change happens when it's accessible to everyone, not just the techies.
For sure. Another trend I'm excited about is this push for interoperability. Right now, the DeFi space, it can be a little all over the place. All these different platforms doing their own thing can be a pain to navigate.
Right, like trying to use the internet back in the day when nothing was connected to anything else.
Exactly. But imagine you could seamlessly move your assets, interact with different DeFi services all from one place. That's the dream of interoperability.
Now, that would be a game changer. Make things so much easier for the average person. But let's be real, one of the big criticisms of blockchain tech is, well, it's not always the fastest or cheapest, especially when it gets popular. Is that a concern for DeFi too? That's a really important point. Scalability, it's a big one. Ethereum, which powers a lot of DeFi, like we talked about, it's had its share of growing pains. Transaction fees can be high, especially when the network is jammed. And those transactions, yeah, sometimes they can be slow.
Okay, so not ideal. But are there any solutions on the horizon?
There are. The DeFi community is working on it. We're seeing things like Ethereum 2.0 being developed, and then there are these things called Layer 2 scaling solutions, all aimed at making those transactions faster, cheaper.
So like building a bigger, faster highway for all that DeFi traffic, it does seem like the pieces are in place for some serious growth in this space.
I think so. It's still early days, though. Definitely going to be some bumps along the way, challenges to overcome, but the potential is really exciting.
I love that we're ending on a note of cautious optimism here. This has been eye-opening, really. We've covered the big ideas behind DeFi, explored some of those platforms, talked about the risks, the rewards, and even peeked into the future a bit.
And even with all that, we've barely scratched the surface. That's what's so cool about DeFi. It's constantly changing, evolving, new platforms, new innovations popping up all the time.
So to everyone listening, consider this your official invitation to stay curious about DeFi. Do your research, see what's out there, and hey, maybe even dip your toes into this exciting world.
Just remember, a little caution goes a long way. And never stop learning. Knowledge is power, especially in this space.
Couldn't agree more. And on that note, thanks for joining us for another deep dive. See you next time.